Good evening, friends, and greetings from Portland, Oregon. As I speak, I'm on campaign in the great American Northwest, touring Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. I will speak more on this, but first I would like to tell you a story. In the spring of 2012, I went on a pilgrimage to Egypt. The day of my return, I got a call saying that I needed to visit the jail to see two potential clients. The FBI, it was explained to me, had raided a compound and arrested a group of neo-Nazis who had been plotting a race war, making chemical weapons, and conducting paramilitary training right in our backyard. This was the beginning of my involvement with the American Front. It has been almost 4 years now, and I have become personal friends with the members of the notorious skinhead organization. Since the beginning of my campaign, I have been called a neo-Nazi, not so much because I represented the members of the American Front in court, but because I refused to throw my clients under the bus. It is a central tenet of American law that everyone is entitled to a fair trial. Whether Black Panther or neo-Nazi, Mexican gang member or Islamic terrorist, even the scariest of people are guaranteed this basic right in our country. It is essential to our legal system and to Western civilization as we understand it. But this is an abstraction, isn't it? Because the fact is that every lawyer in Central Florida was appalled by the case of the American Front. No attorney wanted to be known as the person to defend a vile group of racist hate-mongers, and no one was eager to take their case as it was, a piece of political theater. We were all expected to distance ourselves from the group. In fact, I was denied an employment opportunity because I refused to drop the case, because the managing partner of that firm did not want to be associated with it in any way whatsoever. No matter the dogma we hear about due process, the right to counsel, the notion of being innocent until proven guilty, the fact of the matter is that the members of the American Front were judged as soon as their story hit the media, even by the attorneys, those of us who are tasked with upholding the rule of law. I wonder whether those familiar with the case ever thought about the fact that it was never taken to the federal courts. If a national group of domestic terrorists were plotting a race war inside the United States of America, and the FBI had infiltrated that group, and there was really overwhelming evidence of this, would that not be a federal matter? Then why, we should ask ourselves, why would this be given to the state attorney and the state courts of Florida? It is because there was no evidence of any race war being planned. Neither was there any evidence of chemical weapons. There was no evidence of anything illegal whatsoever. This was not a legal matter for the federal courts. It was a political matter for State Attorney Lawson Lamar in an election year. This is why the American Front was targeted, because neo-Nazis will always be guilty until proven innocent, and they are an easy target for someone looking to gain political points with the media. All of the cases were dropped, except for those of members who were already convicted felons. Those members entered pleas so as to avoid lengthy prison sentences. But this is another failing of our legal system that will have to be discussed at a later time. The important point to note here is that only one of the 14 accused ever went to trial in this case. My friend Marcus Fayella, who was the national chair of the American Front at that time. Mr. Fayella's attorney did exactly what all attorneys are expected to do when defending political opponents of the system. He told the jury that though Mr. Fayella's views were reprehensible, Mr. Fayella was not actually guilty of any crime. He distanced himself from his client, perpetuated the idea that the American Front was a group of backwards, hate-mongering villains, and argued that despite the fact of how vile they all were, no crime had been committed. The reason that I am called a neo-Nazi, the reason that I have been vilified by the media and the leadership of my own party, the reason that I am now being protested by Antifas in the Northwest, is because I refused to do this. I committed a cardinal sin of American law and politics when I dared to say that the members of the American Front were good people, and that I was proud to call them my friends. Not only were these skinheads innocent of any criminal wrongdoing, but they were human. Not only were these skinheads human, they were good people. That is what no one can fathom, and that is why there is such great resistance to this campaign from the left. For we all know that no one accused of white supremacy could ever be a good person, because by virtue of their ideology they reject the central premise of our society, that everyone is equal. The real crime of the members of the American Front had nothing to do with race war, chemical weapons, or violence. Their real crime was their ideology. And I would rather relinquish my license to practice law than be part of the mob that daily spits on the principles our forefathers held dear, the freedom of speech and the freedom of association included. Never have I seen such hate-mongering as I have seen from those who are offended by the American Front. For the mere fact of refusing to denounce its members, I have been the subject of vicious attacks by libertarians and communists alike, by journalists and lawyers, by friends and random internet trolls. I am, along with the members of the AF, called a racist, a fascist, a neo-Nazi, a hate-monger, and all the rest. People have dared to say that I hate my own children because the American Front hates Hispanics and I have sided with the hate-mongers. People have gone so far as to say that the entire reason I ever had Hispanic children was to cover up my own white supremacy. The most hateful speech, the most outrageous attacks, the most hideous insults that I have ever seen have come not from the American Front, but from those who are offended by my defense of the American Front. In point of fact, the members of the American Front have been kind to me and to my family. Never have they said a word about my life choices or insulted me because of them. Never have I been the subject of hateful speech by any of them. More than this, they have helped me and my family in times of need. Conversely, none of these hate-mongering leftists who preach love of their fellow man have ever helped me or my family or anyone I know with anything. I have been the subject of their hateful speech. They have derided me for my Hispanic family, for my use of psychedelics, my religion, and all else. None of these attacks come from the so-called neo-Nazis. They all come from the left, who claim to cherish tolerance and diversity and spiritual exploration and all the rest. Ultimately, Mr. Fiala lost his trial, and I became the lawyer for the appeal. The oral argument finally came last Tuesday. We are now waiting for the ruling in that case so that we can know whether it will go back to trial or whether it will go to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, the American Front has been revived. Yesterday I had the honor of giving a speech to a gathering of the American Front in Washington. I noted that though I was not a member and never would be, we share the same objective of reclaiming America from the financiers and the leftists. My nationalist agenda is broader based, I said, but this makes us allies, not enemies. I called for the unity of nationalist groups and furtherance of the broader movement to restore our country. This call was well received, which is more than I can say of the libertarians, who have resisted my call for unity at every turn and insist on perpetuating their infighting to the detriment of the larger movement. In addition to the fact that they were receptive to the call for greater unity, and are kinder, more tolerant, and more constructive than my detractors, I will also say this for the skinheads. They have something to believe in, and they put their very lives on the line for it. While a guest in Washington, I have heard tell of self-defense spun as hate crimes, lengthy prison sentences for the crimes of others, discrimination by the private sector and the courts in ways that the social justice warriors could not possibly imagine. And despite this persecution for their beliefs, they maintain a positive outlook for the future and are adamant in pursuing their political agenda. If the libertarians had half the resolve my friends do, the libertarians would dominate the American political scene in a single election cycle. But they would rather eat each other alive, debate who is a real libertarian, talk about all the things they oppose rather than the things they believe in, drag each other down instead of lifting each other up. Perhaps if libertarians were to come together and work toward a common goal, say that of restoring our country to its constitutional principles, instead of attacking each other as fascists or racists or closet Republicans, well, perhaps we could achieve that common goal. For my part, I will continue working toward reclaiming our country. I would love to see all libertarians come together and work constructively toward this end, but I will continue on without the party leadership and the old guard if I must. I will not turn away skinheads or racialists any more than I would turn away evangelical Christians or secular humanists. And until the libertarians start providing support for this campaign, they really have no right to demand that I exclude anyone. More to the point, they should listen to their own propaganda about tolerance. The fact that I am not part of a certain subculture does not mean that I must reject the members of that subculture and label them as evil. That is true intolerance. And as the Christ said, you should remove the plank from your own eye before you would remove the speck of dust from your brother's. From here I will travel to Seattle, and I will arrive ultimately in Vancouver, British Columbia. There, a large group of leftists are planning a violent protest to my speech about the common struggle of Americans and Canadians as Westerners. They have already caused the scheduled venue to blacklist me on the charge of being a neo-Nazi, so we will be meeting in the street outside, where we will show the leftists what it means to have a backbone. I will relay the outcome of that event next Sunday. Until then, dear listener, good night.